So, 2 months ago, I set off on a grand adventure to Scotland, the holy land of malt whisky. Armed regrettably with little more than a cell phone camera and a microphone, I was able to bring back some footage of the unique sights and tastes I found there. If only I could do it justice so easily. Perhaps in the future Dave and myself will return, with a film crew in tow and truly capture the spirit of the place. But until then, shaky cameras and all, may I present the Single Malt Review, Destination Scotland. Driving up from England through the lowlands by car, my first stop was Edinburgh. And there, one of the most important streets in the whole world of whisky. So I'm standing in front of Edinburgh Castle, which you can see behind me, but what's really interesting is what's in front of me. The Royal Mile, the world's most density of Scotch whisky shops, which you can find on the entire planet. Now it's threatening to snow, so I better get a go on and see what I can find. I've got a few ideas. Let's go. So we're fairly spoiled for choice here on the Royal Mile, or as it is just below it on Victoria Street down some stairs. There's a lot of fairly classy establishments, a lot of fairly well-known ones, but I've chosen the Bow Bar down here, which I hear has a pretty reputable selection of whiskies to try. So let's have a look inside. So we're here inside the Bow Bar now, and I found something suitably intriguing in a 16-year-old Gordon and MacPhail bottled Lashig, which is not a common whisky to see. Lashig, obviously distilled in the Tobermory distillery. They make their own flight of malts themselves called Tobermory. Lashig is their very heavily peated version. It's a bit like a Long Row from Springbank, you could say. Different brand coming out of a similar distillery, and of course distilled on the Isle of Mull, the only distillery there, so it's an island malt, very much so. I haven't had too many Lashigs, and there's a bit of a danger tasting environment, but I'll do my best with this one to see what's going on. First, the colour, I suppose I should say. Definitely a bourbon cask. First or second fill, I'm not sure. Difficult to say with these peated whiskies. Probably second if I was to make a gamble. On the nose, there's one thing Lashig always has, and that's really, really smoky bacon. Smokier bacon even than Collie Lid, which can throw those sort of flavours up occasionally. Sort of smoky bacon, very marine brine, quite a lot of tar, but not that iodine you get from Islay whiskies. It's got its own thing going on. So on the palate, remarkably fruity. Strangely enough, there's a distinct flavour of raisins and walnut coming through on the palate, in addition to that smoke, which is still very, very strong, as it is in all the Shig whiskies. But yes, raisin and walnut. Who knew? Quite compelling. And 16 years old, quite old for Lashig. It has its own bottling, but it very rarely appears with an age statement. I think 12 years old is about as old as you can buy it on label, so to speak. So to see an older independent bottling is fairly unusual, and it's quite a good whiskey with a difference. So if you like your Ireland whiskies and you've had quite a lot of Talisker, want something a bit different, Lashig is certainly one to look for, if not Tobermory. Tobermory is much softer, much more like maybe a Bunnahabhain if it wasn't terribly peated. Was I to draw a comparison, Lashig is much more like a Collie Lid, much more like a Talisker. Those sort of things. To give it a score, and don't put too much score on this, because this is, as I say, it's a bit of a danger tasting here. We're not doing it as clinically as we normally do with me and Dave on the couch in the garden, but I'd probably give this one a 78. It's pretty jolly good. It's lovely stuff. And this is Tim from the Single Malt Review reporting in from the Bow Bar in Edinburgh. Slanger. And so, after a few more orientation drams at the Bow Bar, my next stop was, of course, Cadenheads, the world's oldest independent bottler. Right, so we're here in Cadenheads and the Royal Mile, Edinburgh, with Chris, which I'll ask a few questions. First of all, how long has the shop been going here?
Here about almost 30 years. About 30 years. It's the oldest whisky shop in the Royal Mile.
And the original Aberdeen one, how long did that go back?
That was founded in 1842.
So a bit further.
Yeah, about 174 years or so.
You can't see it here, but they've got the original window from that one there. It looks fairly rustic. And the Cadenheads itself, that goes back even further, doesn't it?
Well, Cadenheads itself was founded in 1842 in Aberdeen. So we are officially Scotland's oldest independent bottler. It's a pretty good position to be in.
It's not bad, and you're still bottling some. I think you're looking fairly modern as far as independent bottlers go. You've got those fresh, new sort of black bottles coming out, and I've found that you've got the something's coming in. Never mind. Pretty good sort of vector in price and quality at the moment. Is there any sort of drive towards going in one direction or another?
Well, no, what we do is, when you buy kind of the bigger distilleries, the official bottles, you pay for the brand. Because you're just buying the whisky, there's no brand attached to it. So we can sell an expensive or an old Glenlivet at a much cheaper price than what Glenlivet would pay for it. What we try and do is try and keep it in a bracket. So a 29-year-old, regardless of what distillery it comes from, will generally cost the same kind of price. Because we don't want to show favouritism, we don't want to suggest that one whisky is not as good as another. So we just try and keep our prices as fair as possible. We're not really planning on going up or down. You know, we try and keep them. I think generally you'll find that our prices have stayed relatively similar throughout the years. Yeah.
No, good stuff. And what would you say if there's one whisky in the shop which is the rarest? What would it be?
The rarest. Well, that's a tricky one.
Just the craziest whisky.
Well, we've got a £50,000 bottle. It was the first bottling after World War One. Distilled 1919, bottled 1969. So it's a 50-year-old Springbank.
Springbank?
Yep.
Well, it would be Springbank for the priciest whisky in the shop. Well, there you go. We'll work out how much that is in New Zealand dollars in post, I think, but it's going to be a hell of a lot of money. But no, anyway, thanks a great deal. It's Chris from Cadenheads.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thank you very much. Cheers.
Let's find something tasty. So we've got here something that you won't see anywhere else in the whole world. We've got Scotch whisky being bottled straight from the cask. And you won't see this anywhere else because it's entirely illegal to bottle Scotch whisky or to sell Scotch whisky that has been bottled outside of Scotland. So they can do it here. They can sell you something straight from these lovely living, maturing casks of whisky, but you will not see it outside Scotland's borders. So there you go, something you'll only see right here. From Edinburgh, my journey would take me north, up into the Highlands and towards the heart of Scotch whisky country, Speyside. Join me again for that in part 2 of the Single Malt Review's Destination Scotland. In the meantime, do keep safe, and if you enjoy our content, do remember to like and subscribe. That really does help us out in reaching more people.